Greetings, slowly smoked, soft-finned, bony fish. I am Patrick Smith. Welcome back to Disenthrall. I'm going to paint a picture, again, about the rule of law. So, I hope you enjoy hanging out with me for a little while late at night again tonight. We're going to cover several stories that revolve around a central issue that most people that still believe in the state trust is a thing. And I'm going to try and make a clear case in a video that you can hopefully share with people to sort of undermine that trust. Rightfully undermine the trust, not, falsely or with no trickery involved. I think we have to begin by talking about Tony Timpa's life. A lot of you are probably already familiar with the story. It happened a while ago, 2016. A lot of you are probably already aware of the recent news in the case against the several police officers that kneeled on his back until he was dead, while laughing and joking about it, while he told them, "You're gonna kill me, you're gonna kill me, you're gonna kill me." For those that aren't aware, the summary of the story is basically that Tony Timpa, the guy that they killed, called 911, told them that he was having trouble, told them that he was off his meds for schizophrenia and depression, or he told them that he suffered from schizophrenia and depression, and that he was off his prescription medication. So he called the people that we are trained since birth that we are supposed to call when we're in dire situations and we need help. He called them. They showed up, and a short time later, he was dead, suffocated, I think, under the knees of police officers while they laughed and joked about him being past his bedtime or whatever. You guys probably already heard the story. It was absolutely outrageous. And of course, there was no White Lives Matter marches in the streets over the white guy getting kneeled on to death, but that's not the point of the show. That's not that's not the picture I'm going to paint for you today. We're going to talk about the rule of law today. And so what happened in the case of Tony Timpa? Well, the case took years, as this justice system is wont to do. And this is just his picture. I like to keep the pictures of the people involved in the stories I'm talking about on the screen, because I think it's important that we connect with the individuals, good or bad. If it's a victim, it's important, I think, that we identify with them and we realize that these are just people like anybody else. And if they're the aggressor, as was the case, this is one of the cops. I don't have pictures of the other ones, but this was one of the cops that was charged in this guy's murder. I'm calling it murder because that's what it was. And I think it's important that we see the faces of the people involved so that we realize, hey, man, that could be anybody on my block. That's a normal Joe. That's a cop that most people look up to and respect as a hero and a protector and a servant of a servant of the peace, a protector of justice. So what happened? And I guess while I talk about this, I don't want to always show the really terrible stuff that happens, but just in the background, maybe we'll play a little bit of this. This was, him on the ground begging for his life while, the cops kneeled on him while he said that they were going to kill him. Well, there's this law called qualified immunity, some of you may have heard about. So, when the government's agents do evil, as long as some judge can be convinced that the people that did the evil didn't mean to, thought they were doing their job, if the people doing the evil thought that what they were doing was allowed under their, powers of whatever office or position that they hold of power, that's all it takes for qualified immunity. they get off scot-free. Qualified immunity is a subset. It is an ancestor. It is not predecessor. It's it's something derived from, or that came from, something much stronger and much more terrible called sovereign immunity. And for those of you that aren't aware of what sovereign immunity is, that's what sovereigns used to have. Kings and queens. You could not charge a king with a crime. Precursor? No, it's what comes after. Man, I'm just terrible with words tonight. Sovereign immunity. So a king could kill somebody, and you couldn't even charge him with the crime. In fact, probably calling him a murderer would have been treasonous back in the day, because the kings, the sovereigns, had sovereign immunity. That just means you can't touch them. The system ignores their actions. It ignores the evils that they do. Well, we have a thing these days in these governments that we suffer under called qualified immunity, which just means that they're immune in the same way the sovereigns used to be immune for the evils that they did, but it's qualified now, which just basically means that it's not absolute immunity. It's dependent on something, except the thing that it's dependent on is literally what they can convince a judge they were thinking at the time. Well, judge, I was convinced that, this was the appropriate procedure, and that when we're trying to restrain somebody, we can kneel on them and joke about them while they, slowly die under our knees. And you convince a judge of that, and you get off scot-free. That's it. So your protectors can abuse you, can harm you, can kill you, and they will get off scot-free more often than not. I don't even need you to believe me on that. Do your own research. It's obvious. It is completely obvious. So when we talk about we are a nation of laws is the thing that you're told since birth. We are a nation of laws, and sometimes they say laws, not men. A nation of laws, not men. So what matters is the law, and making sure that the law is held sovereign, so to speak. Except we're constantly shown examples of when that is absolutely not the case. And we're shown so many examples that it is blatant blindness to think that this is a nation of laws at this point. And what I'm going to show you, the stories I'm going to show you are going to kind of illustrate this for the people that might not have come to this realization yet. That was just the first one. When you call them for help and they kill you, those people get off scot-free. Scot-free! Like nothing happened. It's over. They're fine. It's all good now. We're 4 years later. Don't worry about it. Next thing I want to show you is when people do actual wrong. And the justice system is supposed to protect the innocent people and their property. And this is a recent story out of Fort Worth, which is pretty near to where I live. There were riots over the other guy that cops kneeled on until he died from it. More recently, except this guy was black, so he got riots with his murder. And there were some people that destroyed a lot of property. And I'm not concerned about government property. That's invalidly owned property, and that's a topic for another day. I'm talking about non-government property, like the property that you and I would own is some of the stuff that they were destroying. And so the Fort Worth police captured and charged a bunch of people in these riots. And, it's politically expedient not to prosecute so many people that were protesting police brutality. And so the Fort Worth Police Department, I don't know if you can see this, it's a little bit small, but I'll read his letter. This is from Chief Edwin Krause of the Fort Worth Police Department. He wrote a letter saying, on May 31st, Fort Worth police arrested several dozen people for rioting during a protest. Since that time, the protests in the city have been peaceful. The protesters have expressed their anger over police misconduct and have demanded changes. The cry to reform the police profession is echoing across our nation, and we must start here at home. We hear those voices and we are committed to enacting the necessary reforms to improve our police department and our relationship with the community we serve. Words are a start, but must be backed up with action. To that end, I am dropping all charges for rioting that have resulted from the protests in Fort Worth, and each individual that was arrested for that violation will be notified by letter that their charges have been dropped. This is just one step on a long journey, but I hope it shows that the Fort Worth Police Department is committed to walking the path of reform with our community. So what about the victims of these people's crimes? The actual victims of their actual crimes that you arrested during this riot? Do they get justice? Does the rule of law not apply or matter or concern those victims? Because it's politically expedient for you to virtue signal with Black Lives Matter, even when they're causing damage? A frontal cortex says he lived near Fort Worth for about 18 months. That place is insane. Might as well be a one-party state infested by Jesus chasers. It's very interesting, though. You're right. This is a very Republican-red area. So it's surprising to me that they would be interested in virtue signaling in this way, because that's what this is. This is a virtue signal with victims. And it's a great example of the fact that this is not rule of law. Once again, we have another example. You have a crime that took place. You have qualified immunity. Now we have more crimes that took place. And now the actual criminals are, again, let go. A whole lot of them are just let go. Is that rule of law? No. And I'm going to tell you where all this is going as we go. The next one. This is another recent one. 911 call from Brianna Taylor shooting death released. Somebody kicked in the door and shot my girlfriend. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this. This is another very recent story that exacerbated the riots that are going on in many cities right now. This is basically a no-knock raid over a drug search warrant. In the middle of the night, the Blue Line gang showed up, kicked in the door. They thought they were being broken into by robbers or whatever, and defended themselves. And the cops apparently unleashed a hail of bullets into the house and shot this guy's girlfriend, killed her. They arrested the guy, charged him with a crime, and eventually had to drop the charges. But no mention in any of these news stories has anything to do with the actual criminals in this situation. Somebody was killed. Whose fault was that? Does it say in here? Let's see. Who ended up getting charged with this murder? Let's see. That's not in here. It's not in any of the news stories, because the murderers are hiding, are located inside the blind spot that is belief in the authority of government. The murderers are in that void that most people can't see into. The murderers, of course, were the police in this case. They were breaking into someone's house over a victimless crime, which is not a crime, as you know if you follow this channel. They were the aggressors. They initiated the confrontation. They shot the peaceful, innocent person that was sleeping in their house. No one even asks that question. What happens to the cops here? Nothing. Rule of law? Pfft, please. Okay. But what happens when we get mad because no one talks about the problem with the cops murdering Brianna Taylor? What happens when people protest that and get angry that no one's being held to account? What happens? Well, 87 people were charged with felonies because they were protesting at the Attorney General's house. The Attorney General being the one that you would have expected to charge the murderers in this case with a crime. But she didn't do that. Instead, she charged 87 people protesting her protection of the criminals with felonies. Something about interfering with the what is it? Due to their refusal to leave the property and their attempts to influence the decision of the Attorney General with their actions. Each person was charged with intimidating a participant in a legal process, which is a Class D felony, disorderly conduct in the second degree, Class B misdemeanor, and criminal trespass in the third degree, which is a violation. So these people are now felons. The murderers are heroes, as usual, that I haven't checked, but probably still have their jobs. Rule of law? No, I think it's rule of politics. Let's continue. You guys have probably heard of the cul-de-sac Commandos. Jesus, Zero Hedge. Can you make your website any harder to see? Oh man, I should have had this prepared for you guys. I apologize. I will do this later. Let's see if we can get rid of some of these ads so we can actually read the words Zero Hedge. Okay. St. Louis Prosecutor's Office. Let me back up briefly and just fill people in that haven't been following the McCloskey's ordeal. A bunch of protesters broke down a gate into private property, into a private community of wealthy individuals, and were marching down a private street outside the McCloskey's house. They got their weapons of self-defense, stood outside on their property, and waved their guns and yelled threats to keep the mob away from their house. Luckily, everything was fine. They survived. The mob didn't come on their property and moved on. What do you think the government did? Oh yeah, they arrested them. They arrested and charged both of the McCloskeys with a crime for defending their home with guns against a mob of people that had broken into private property. Rule of law. And these people are, they said all the right words to the news cameras. They said that they didn't have any ill will to the cops that were in the process of arresting them for defending their property. Oh no, they were good citizens that didn't speak ill of the Blue Line Gang thugs that were caging them for self-defense and defense of their property. They didn't say a bad word about anybody involved. They just went right along with it. And how were they rewarded? Well, some of the evidence in their case was recently altered so as to be able to classify one of the guns or items in their house as a lethal weapon. One of the guns was inoperable. It was assembled in a way as that it could not be fired. And after they confiscated, as part of arresting these people and searching their house, they confiscated this item. They disassembled it and reassembled it into a functioning gun and then said, aha, we have a lethal weapon now. This is a crime. We can charge them with this. And there's documents that show that it did not function. They reassembled it and made it able to function, which they then classified as a lethal weapon. So the victims in the stories that we just talked about, it was sort of like the victim was dead and the violator, the criminal, got off scot-free. Now, this is in a way worse, in a way not worse, because they didn't get just straight up murdered by the state. But now the state is actually attacking the victims further. It's like re-victimizing the victims rather than coming to their defense, rather than the police having done their job and enforced the law, which is what they're entrusted with and paid to do, and which is the monopoly that they force on us. They don't allow us to seek alternative protection services on pain of death. You can't compete with the police. So they force you to have their services, and then when they fail to do their job, their only job, which is to protect you and your property. When they fail, who do they go after? The mob of criminals that were trespassing and damaging property to get into breaking and entering private property? Oh, no. They go after the victims. So again, I'll just show you a couple of the awesome images that I found here. That one's one of my favorites. So we have this idea of the rule of law. And I want to talk about it, and I want to expose it for the red herring that it is. For anybody that hasn't already, that isn't already awake to this fact, that the rule of law is worse than non-existent. The rule of law is a decoy. It's a red herring. It's a distraction. It's something that you're taught since birth to think is real and exists, and that is in operation to protect you. As a not gaslight, it's just a red herring. That's the word for it. It's something that's there to distract you while they get to go off and just rule like the tyrants that they are and do whatever they want, interpret the law however they want, prosecute who they want, re-attack, re-victimize the victims whenever they want, murder people and walk away scot-free whenever they want, while you think you're protected by the justice system, while you think you're being ruled by law instead of men. It's worse than nothing. If they didn't make that claim, you wouldn't think you were protected. You would think you needed to protect yourself because there was nothing out there that was protecting you for you. But you're taught that, don't worry, there's this justice system and the rule of law that's there to protect you. So it's worse. It makes you lower your guard while they get to run roughshod over innocent lives and outright fail to do their job of protecting people. I've been seeing this a lot everywhere lately, and I don't mean the red herring of the rule of law. I mean just the red herring of rules. And I talked about this in my video on social media when I got banned from Facebook, permanently banned from Facebook recently. And I think it's a point that bears to be made. I originally was thinking about it in terms of social media. And the point that I made then was stop thinking that the rules have literally anything to do with whether or not you get banned from social media. They do not. They have nothing to do with it. If you follow the rules or if you break the rules, it has nothing to do with them banning you. They ban you for who you are and for what you represent. And if you follow every one of their rules to a T and they don't like who you are or what you represent, you will be banned. And if you break all of their rules and they like who you are and what you represent, you will be just fine. The only thing the rules do is to serve as a red herring, a distraction. If you try and follow the rules, well, the people that they don't like might try and follow the rules, and the people that they don't like will self-censor a little bit, which will suppress the voices of the people they don't like for them without them having to do anything or even appear like the bad guy. They just put out rules. Everybody is told that if they follow them, they'll be fine, but they won't. It's a red herring. It has nothing to do with that. And so that idea as the rules as a red herring, I've just been seeing it everywhere. And the rule of law is another great example of that. If they like who you are, who you represent, you will be immune from prosecution. If they don't like who you are or what you represent, no matter what the ethics of the situation are, no matter what the laws say, you will be caged and prosecuted or killed. Frontal makes a good point. The rule of law is actually the rule of judges, who are just legalized terrorists. They use fear to get power instead of logic and ethics. If you go through life now over the next couple days or a week, and you just start thinking about any situation that you're in which there are not even involuntary rules, just rules put in place that are especially, this is the tell. This is the giveaway when you're in one of these situations where the rules are a red herring. When the rules are not equally enforced, that's a great tell. So in any situation in which somebody gets special treatment and somebody doesn't, you are in a situation where the rules are a red herring. Where the rules don't matter, it's actually just about you and who you are and what you represent. So that's the point I wanted to make. I wanted to just sort of put a sword in the heart of the idea of the rule of law using just some relatively recent examples. Look, people could put together a multi-hour documentary, a weeks-long mini-series, mega-series, trilogy, quadrilogy on all of the ways in which the rule of law is a red herring and isn't actually paid attention to. But I just wanted to really quickly show you the different sides. When the heroes, quote unquote heroes, kill somebody, they get off free. When the bad guys are liked by the politicians, they get all their charges dropped. When good guys, when the victims are unpopular or take an unpopular action, well, they get caged too. The rule of law is non-existent. It is a red herring. It is a distraction. It's about who you are. It's about what you represent.